Alan Davies, my family didn't want me to talk about my father's abuse. The comedian's success has concealed a life of trauma, alcohol and violence. He shares how he made it out of the darkness. Men who've been abused in childhood take, on average, 20 to 25 years to talk about it, says Alan Davies, with a weary shake of his grey corkscrew curls. If the abuse occurred within a family, as it usually does, the instinct to withhold feels right, because families don't usually support the victim. The 59-year-old Jonathan Creek star still finds his chest tightening when he talks about being sexually abused by his father. Davies was roughly 8 to 13 years old when it happened. His fans are so used to him being sweet and silly, clowning about on the panel show QI, that he's aware it might be difficult for them to absorb what he has to say. It's still difficult for Davies to say it, even though it's almost 30 years since a therapist first helped him to recognize his father's special cuddles as attacks, 8 years since Davies went to the police, who arrested his father but were unable to press charges because he was too deep into Alzheimer's, 5 years since Davies published his devastating memoir about the experience, Just Ignore Him, 2020. That book unpacked all the terrible things he'd suppressed for decades. There was the loss of his mother, who died of leukemia, aged 38, when Alan was just 6, the way he was manipulated into being the naughty, and therefore uncredible, middle child in his family, and the abuse itself. No wonder he has since admitted to struggling with the klaxon that shames the laughably wrong answers he's expected to give on QI. The comedic setup echoes a childhood in which he was told to shut up and his siblings were advised to ignore him. To a large extent, they have. My older brother stopped speaking to me after I had Dad arrested, he tells me today, cradling a soft drink in the corner of a North London pub. He stopped sending birthday cards to my kids. I still have some contact with my sister, I see her son, he's an Arsenal supporter, so, he shrugs. But then the defiance mounts. They would have still preferred I didn't say anything at all. But this is bigger than my family. This has happened to other people. It's happening to children today and tomorrow. It's happening to a lot of children, all the time. He's right, according to a 2025 NSPCC survey of children aged 11 to 17, 1 in 20 children in the UK have been sexually abused. You can't not shine a light on it, Davies says, just because you find it a bit awkward. Suddenly, it's as though I've vanished, and he's arguing directly with his brother. Anyway, how are you the one finding this discomforting? Can you imagine what it's like for me? Really? Just stop it. You shut up. The public have been much kinder to Davies. When he has spoken these awful truths into the stand-up microphone, he has found comfort in the immediacy of the audience response. Many of the people who come to the shows will have had bleak experiences that aren't usually talked about. So accessing those experiences, couching them within a comedy show, is reassuring, I think. Davies, in fact, found a whole new surrogate family, supportive and warm, on the 1990s alternative comedy circuit. He celebrates them in his new memoir, White Male Stand-Up. It sets the anxiety of a 2024 diagnosis with bladder cancer, which has been successfully treated, against his memories of early gigs in the company of fellow performers such as future QI co-stars Joe Brand and the late Sean Locke. Davies was a hit from the beginning, using quick improvisation and childlike charm to win over audiences. Today, he locates the root of those skills in trauma. For instance, he thinks he owes the ability to read a room and react spontaneously to it to his hypervigilance. Did you know abuse survivors tend to jump at loud noises? If one of my kids drops a plate, I jump out of my skin. His brilliant physical comedy, he says, was honed as a small child. I made my mum laugh by doing daft things, he smiles. About 4 or 5 of my stand-up routines ended up with me on the floor, which is where I quite often had to be to get my mum to pick me up. He says he has recently begun to think that, I might have been my mum's favorite. I suspect my dad might have been quite jealous. Davies reminds me how white and male Britain's comedy scene was when he started out. It became apparent in the late 1980s, as more and more comedy clubs opened up, that they were just flooded with these young white blokes, and I was one of them. He says his wife, Katie, is often astonished at the number of men who just picked up a microphone and went on about themselves for as long as anybody would listen. Who gave them the confidence to think they could just do that, she says. But I loved being one of those blokes. He chuckles. Comedy wasn't then an obviously lucrative career. Nobody thought beyond filling up their diary for 3 or 4 months ahead. There were no millionaires. Nobody was thinking, I could go on an arena tour and be the next Michael McIntyre or Lee Mack. Brand was one of the few women on the circuit. Davies portrays her as a laudable figure. I'd hesitate to say she was matriarchal, he says, but her emotional intelligence dwarfed everybody else's. We were careening around all over the place, getting into various scrapes. As his fame grew, after a few drinks, his rage would see him, as he puts it, caught out. Brand was quick to spot the angry boy lurking behind that amiable facade. After he hit her then boyfriend, Jim Miller, instead of cutting Davies out, she asked him how often he got into fights. Joe was not at all judgmental, he recalls. She did 19 years as a psychiatric nurse. On a Saturday night, in that job, she'd be dealing with the people the police couldn't handle. She sent Davies to a therapist she had known for a long time. She trusted him, which was important to me. I don't know how many of us she might have sent to see him over the years. I'm sure I wasn't the only one. There are quite a lot of casualties on the circuit. Fame and money made life worse for Davies. After Jonathan Creek turned him into a household name, he made £975,000 for a series of commercials for the Abbey National Bank, because life's complicated enough, and moved into a swanky North London apartment, complete with a swimming pool that, one day, he found himself utterly paralyzed in, unable to walk forwards or backwards for hours. The gap between his cheery stand-up and the surly TT he became offstage was starting to pull him apart. He feels this became evident in an early appearance on Jonathan Ross's chat show. I did the stand-up. Then I wanted to be interviewed like a serious person. But the contrast between my stand-up persona and the real me was too much, and I couldn't manage it. Jonathan was very professional and moved things along, and it was fine. But I felt so uncomfortable. In that moment, you saw the two people, with and without the mask. I think all comedians are like that. He's now aware that during stand-up, there are thousands of thoughts flying around in my head. What's coming out of my mouth is the least of what's going on. Quite often, I've been making a lot of decisions about what not to say.